in discussion and debate, in good fellowship and cheer, let us pause to celebrate. Aquinas Damas, be here. Before I start, I think I want to say a few words about my wife. And the reason for that is that we've been married for almost 50 years. And almost everything that I've been involved with in my whole 50 years, in fact more than that, she's been sort of helping me, and she certainly helped me a great deal with being president of this organization and everything else that I'm involved with. And I've said many times in my life that I would have changed every single decision I ever made, which included even going into medicine and neurosurgery, except one. And that was to marry my wife, Pam. And I wish for all medical students up there that, you know, in 50 or 60 years' time, when you're into this position, I hope you can say that too. Because that's a really nice thing to have a partner, someone you love, and someone you can interact with for 50 or more years. And as I said, the first 50 years are the hardest, and so it's so the next group, so it's going to be even easier in the next number of years that we hope to have. The second thing, and it's been an absolute honor to be the president of this association. You know, as a neurosurgeon, I've been involved with many, many organizations and had been in many, many conferences. But this is the best. There's no question this is the best. And the reason it's the best is, like today, we have medical students giving presentations, medical students who are moderators of the sessions, medical students who are involved in all kinds of aspects of this organization. What organization do you know that has that? I don't know of any. I don't know of any organization that is so engaged with the medical students, with the residents, with that group of individuals who are in the middle area. My goal has been to sort of try to engage more medical students and more residents and more individuals in this organization. And I think we've done that, we're beginning to do that. And my hope is that individuals will continue who are with us today, the younger individuals in particular, will continue to be interested in this organization and contribute on the committees where there's going to be a medical student in all our committees, contribute to all the things that are involved in this organization. Because I think that's the way it's going to continue to evolve and grow and really be something that's important. You know, it's been said that, you know, what's a library? What's a history of medicine library, really? You know, what is it? And one of the ideas is that it's sort of like you have medicine on one side and you have libraries on the other side. And then there's a bridge between them. And that bridge is really a communication with the humanities, which is really represented by the library systems and that whole knowledge base of the humanities. And on the other side, you have medicine. And it's up to us to decide how wide that bridge is. And I can tell you, as someone who works with artificial intelligence every day, that bridge is closing. It's closing very rapidly. And not only artificial intelligence, but there's all kinds of other things that are changing. And the question is, how are we going to keep that bridge between the humanities and medicine open for the future? And one of the things to do that is libraries. Why are libraries important in this new world? Why are they important? Why can't we just see everything on the internet? Why can't we have it all on the internet? And, you know, we got ChatGPT, you know, we can know everything, right? Well, think about it for a second. Every book that you have, you can open it, and there's someone who has written that book, actually done the writing. There's someone who's edited it, or not. Then someone has to put the book together. Someone has to do the art, if there's art in the book, or pictures, or whatever. And then it goes off somewhere, and it's put together. It's got a cover. And then it's sent out, and people buy it. And that's been happening ever since people were able to write on tablets in Babylon. There's something sort of very unique about that whole process. And it's a human process, right? There's machines in it, but it's still part of a human process. And so the question becomes then, what's special about that process? What's special about that process is if you look on the internet and you see a particular, you see Vesalius, for example, first edition, 1550. And it'll go through the pages for you. You'll see the pictures. You can expand them if you want, play with them, etc. But then do something different. Have the 1550 edition in front of you. Open the book, look at the outside. It's been around for almost 500 years. Where's it been? Who's had it? Whose fingers have touched it? You're just adding to that chorus of life that has touched that particular book. Then open it. Turn the pages one by one. Feel the pages. Can you do that on the internet? Can you get that feeling of the people that have been there before who've turned that page, have looked at that particular skeleton or that particular muscle man, who marvel, you can marvel at the background. You can think of who's done it, who's done that particular drawing, for example. How's it been done? How did that happen? As you go through each of those pages. And if there's some marginal sort of notes there, that tells you something else about the book. Because you can look at it, you can look at the ink, you can think about it, someone's written something, and that's part of the sort of story of that particular book. And so, I'm not sure that the internet can reproduce that for you. In fact, I'm sure it can. I've thought about the idea, believe it or not, of developing an artificial intelligence system, and we can do that, where you can get the feeling of turning the pages. You can actually feel yourself turning the pages, and you can do this. And you can blow it up in front of you and do all kinds of things, but there's still something magical, something very magical about books. And a lot of us in this room collect books. And one of the reasons we collect books is because it's sort of magical. They're magical things. A book's magic in its way. It survived, especially an older book. It survived fire, war, devastation, mold, rats. It survived it all. And it's still here. The sadness of it is all the books that have not. All the books that have not survived. All the books in the various libraries have been destroyed by war, by all the things that destroy books. One of the things that destroys books more than anything is fire. Fire is the capacity to just wipe out a whole library very quickly and efficiently. Much more than water or whatever. Fire is a very dangerous thing in libraries. It can remove a whole generation, whole culture very, very quickly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. My talk today is really about saving one library, which is the Osler Library. And it really begins with the idea of Sir William Osler's vision about what the library should be. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Osler gift, how it began, how he thought about it, the deed, when he deeded his library to McGill. Ideas about wills, because there's more than one will related to the library. Memorandums, which there's a lot, and you'll see that. And then an attempt to change the library. Will be an initial wave. There have been a number of waves, but I'll just stop. Then there was a fire. Then a very, very dangerous storm arose. And that storm was associated with the complete closure of the Osler Library. And then there was rebirth. I'll talk about that too. But I'll only give you a little bit of a skip it about each of those individual issues. It's a much longer story than I'm going to be able to tell you today. But the reason I'm doing this is not so much because of the Osler Library as a building, as a place where books are kept, as some type of magical place. I'm talking about it more from the fact that there's something special about medical students and libraries. The humanities and libraries, which knowledge is present. And that's why I think this particular battle was worth waging and worth winning. So, let me start. What are my objectives? I'm doing the thing about objectives because that's what you're supposed to do, right? But bear with me. So I start with that. The initial wave and the fire, surviving the storm, and rebirth. So everybody has been, or many of you may have been, in Oxford, visited Osler's home. And if you go into Osler's home now, and you make a video, there's some things there. And the reason I've cut it down like this is it's only a very minor part of Osler's home that exists now. And I want you to try to, in your imagination, think about what his home must have looked like, in color, if you could. There are 8,000 books that are distributed through his home. There's books on the tables. There's books here. There's papers here. There's books here. There's books here. More books. More books. Continuation of books. More books. More books. They infest the place. They're everywhere. So, anybody who has a library has a very difficult problem to deal with. And the problem is, what am I going to do with this library? What are my options? Well, you can sell it. Osler bought many of his books at various sales. You can sell your library. You'll get the money back, or part of it, or more than it, depending. You can leave your library to your family. And part of Osler's library was scheduled to go to his son. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And the third thing is you can leave it to an institution. You have some choices. There's museums, there's all kinds of places you can leave your library to. But who are you going to leave your library to? Well, Osler had choices. There was McGill, Oxford, Pennsylvania, Johns Hopkins. So he had all these options. So what happened then? Well, this is the foundation document of his library, the creation of his library. And so in this foundation type document, it was produced 8 years before his death. So clearly he had begun to think about this, what to do with his library before that time. But it's interesting because it's signed and witnessed. he conceives of where's he going to give it? Who's he going to give it to? Well, in recognition for the many kindnesses shown to me as a student and professor at my old school, I have for many years collected for its library. That tells you that he collected, at least partially in his mind, for his library for McGill. By this deed, I hand over McGill University for its medical faculty. Interesting. The medical faculty here, not McGill per se, the medical faculty. And that'll be really important later on. The manuscripts, etc., etc., etc. He had an idea, though. This is his vision. Vision is the whole known. He has a name for it. There's reasons for that, but he has a name. So he's thinking about it from that aspect of it. And then he signs it, but he makes two demands, crucial demands. They are the books to be kept together. The second demand in the deed, that the members of the profession should have free access to them for the purpose of study. So he wants his library to be kept together. He collected it, he wanted it to be kept together. It was in his home, it was part of his life. He wanted it together. And he wanted it to be used for something, like he had used it for something. And he wanted people to have free access to it. Almost like everybody in the world be latchkey kids. Everybody can come into his library. That's sort of what he wanted. Okay. So, the war, other things. I'm sure there are other documents that probably were being made in this interim. But 8 months before his death, he begins to think about putting it together. What should it look like? What should the library be? So he talks about the curators. Let me go back here a bit. And other aspects which were technical. But then he says what I think is probably the most interesting part of this particular memorandum, which the library to serve, as far as possible, two functions. The education of students in the history and methods of science and medicine, and to promote research into those subjects. So, the idea of education of students and also research. Next, it goes on. The library is for the use of members of the medical profession, including, of course, medical students. Critical here, eh? Of course, medical students. He didn't have to say that, but he puts it right in there. Next, he also is thinking about the idea, I particularly wish my colleagues of Laval. Laval was a French university in another city. My French-Canadian brothers to take advantage of the many important works of the old masters of their native land, in the collection of which I have made them specially in mind. So Osler collects books in the French language because of Laval. Now, you have to understand Montreal at that time. Montreal was predominantly English. Laval was predominantly French. But in Osler's mind, he already had thought, well, I'm going to have both. I'm going to also collect for the French side, not only for the English side. I'm going to be general. I'm going to make this almost like, for example, a global type of idea related to Canada. Top of that, he talks about special students from outside Montreal are to be given every facility in the library. A memorandum on how to use the library will be found at the end of the introduction to the catalog. So the catalog is already being designed at that time. He's already thinking about doing the catalog. A really important thing, he then writes, knowing how with time conditions change, the curators, he's gone through the curators already, are at liberty to make alterations in these regulations, respecting as far as possible my wishes herein expressed. So he says, this is what I would like to happen, but in the future, if things change, let the curators decide what's best. Other memorandums. One was related to his son, and sort of the idea initially was that these books were going to go to his son, his previous thinking, but those books now are going to go to Johns Hopkins. And then all the other books are going to go to Montreal. And then Major Francis and the rest are going to put together the catalog. And what's interesting here is that basically he wants the catalog produced and done and published before the books move out of his home and come to Montreal. And that takes 10 years. So he'd already thought about that part. And then this is about it, with the help of others, print the catalog before the books are sent out. All right, 20 days before his death. He's clearly dying now. He knows he's going to die. There's no question about that. So what is he doing 20 days before his death? He's got to write his final will. And so he writes his final will. This is it. Everything you've seen here is his wills. The memorandum, his signature. This is it. It's all in the Osler Library. But this is all it. I hereby revoke all previous wills. Like before, I leave to the medical faculty, McGill College, Montreal Medical and Scientific Library. He talks about Grace, number 13, Norham Gardens. And Grace is his executor. And is dutifully signed by him. Interesting, he's still writing pretty well 20 days before his death. And the other individuals, as you can see here. So what's Sir William Osler's vision here then? He conceived the library, and he was involved in every single component of what's going to happen with the library. Donated to McGill, Dean of Donations really, makes the only real two conditions, which are that they should be kept together, members of the profession have access. The memorandum, of course, medical students, research, education, and the board has the ability to change things. So that's it. That's how it's written. 10 years go by. These individuals are now implementing the vision, putting together the catalog, putting everything together at 13 Norham Gardens in Oxford. The library comes to McGill. This is a little later rendition of it, but the library is here. And so are his ashes. You can argue whether he wanted his ashes here or not, but he probably did. Let's think for a second. If you're a collector, spend a lot of your life reading and loving books, what a nice thought to think that you're always going to be with your books forever. Interesting. Lady Osler is also there, along with the first librarian, Dr. Francis. So that's how it is. Appropriate guidelines are made, adapted a little bit over the years, but they are completely associated with exactly what Sir William Osler wants. Exactly what he wants was put together. And it continues to be put together and changed occasionally. There have been waves about thinking about the Osler Library, etc. But then the big first wave occurs. And this wave occurs in 2013. So what's the wave? Well, this is a wave from David Eilman, the Vice Principal of Health Affairs, and he sends out this to every single individual, all of McGill faculty. He says, first, the Life Sciences Library is not slated for closure, nor is the Osler Library closing, as others, rumors have suggested. I've not approved any such decision. Nevertheless, the current budgetary context, together with the ongoing evolution of the way in which faculty members and students use library services, makes it necessary that we re-examine the way in which we provide library services. Sounds very good, right? Sounds good. What does he do? Closes the Life Sciences Library and wants to close the Osler Library. But not all. Thinking at that time was, why don't we just leave the Osler Library where it is? It has 8,000 of his Osler's original things that he donated. But the other part of the library, which is now, let's say, another 90,000 books and other things, all kinds of other things, they'll go somewhere else. So we'll have a bit of a museum. Museum will just be this little museum with Osler's stuff in it. How do we fight that? Well, family members, alumni, press, you name it, we fought it. So the Life Sciences Library left, the medical school, but the Osler Library. So imagine for a second you have a massive Life Sciences Library. The Osler Library is part of it, and suddenly everything around it is gone to another building, down the hill. And it's sitting there by itself now. So that is where we are. The first wave. However, the waves keep coming. In this Osler Library review of 2016, there's all kinds of things about weaknesses, opportunities, etc., etc. But it says this: there had always been, for a long time, one librarian, the Osler librarian, and a secondary librarian. The secondary librarian's role was to deal with medical students, was to deal with research, was to deal with a lot of things. And the primary librarian's role was, to buy books, to do administration, to do all that kind of stuff. And so it worked very effectively for many years. And then the comment is the staff complement of 2 librarians and 2 librarian assistants, so that meant 4, can be seen as excessive relative to the volume of use, although the nature of special collection work requires sufficient personnel. Now, I'll rewind here. The university provides lighting and these 2 librarians and the 2 assistants. Nothing else. The library buys books, the library has an endowment, the library is working completely independently. Has a board of curators, which buys books, which does all kinds of things, but it works independently. So to the university, this is the problem. A little over $300 and some odd thousand. The 4 people. So what happens? Chris Lyons was a librarian at that time, and he writes, this email is to announce as January 1st, I will be moving from the Osler Library to be head of rare books and special collections here in McGill. After 10 years, current director, rare books, he's gone away, and I'm going to take the position. So the dean of libraries then moves the head librarian out to another job. The assistant librarian, in essence, goes with him. So we now have no librarian at the Osler Library. So both librarians are gone. However, we then have a search committee, etc. We then Mary Earle comes on as our new librarian, but we do not get the assistant librarian back. That's gone. I can tell you how many times I argued with the dean about it. Could he not provide some money, etc.? We tried to raise money, etc. It wasn't a go. So that's where we were. The next wave. This is written by the dean of libraries, associated with another report. Relocating Osler's room and collection, while it's likely to be contentious. Yeah, it's likely to be contentious. Yep, you're right, absolutely right. The dean and associate dean, together with other members of the library senior team, should immediately begin planning how to move the Osler Library from its current location to part of new spaces and an integral component of McGill rare book collections. Remember, this is rare books they want to move here. The rest of the library they're not as interested in. There are issues that need to be addressed before such a move can be considered, including a long history of Osler within the Faculty of Medicine, the lack of space, humanities, social sciences library. In other words, they don't have enough space to even move it, but that's a problem. And the historic paneling within the current Osler. So they can't move the paneling. So that's the problem. And of course, then the Osler Library Board of Curators must be involved in any consideration of these recommendations. Nice of them to think about it. Then what happens is I have a number of meetings, as do other members of the standing committee, with her, and we get one change. One change. Change is the library has no intentions of proceeding with implementing the recommendations of the Sick Leave Review Committee, recommendations, of ROAR, I won't go into that, pertaining to Osler Library recommendations, et cetera, at the present time. That's what we were able to negotiate at that point in time. At the present time, they weren't going to move it. So we got that. So the idea was that you build a brand new library, and they're going to call it Fiat Let There Be Light. It's a big library they're going to build. Huge number of areas. Not one consideration for putting the Osler Library in there. Not one. Then the fire. Now the fire really had nothing to do with the Osler Library. What happened was there's probably some individuals who were smoking on the roof, or smoking in an area near the roof. Cigarette goes into the roof overlying the Osler Library, catches fire, and there's a reasonable fire. However, the fire's on the roof. Smoke never gets into the Osler Library. None of the sprinkler systems activate. And the problem really is the water that is going to come from the firemen. Chris Lyons, who was nearby, really saves a lot by talking to the fire individuals, and the firemen are relatively careful, don't use a lot of water, and there's really little to no damage at all to the, in real sense, to the Osler Library or Osler's collection. However, there's a problem. Everything in the Osler Library has to be moved because of the water damage and because of the possibility of mold, et cetera, et cetera. So every book, every painting, every print, everything has to be moved out so this work can be done. And Mary is involved in organizing and doing all this. This is a massive project. It involves 100,000 books and all kinds of other things. And they're all moved out quickly because of the problems associated with the water. And that's organized, done incredibly quickly. Huge numbers of volunteers do it, and it's just done. Where's it moved? Well, it's moved to the other library. And if you remember, people were here in Montreal in 2019. This is the library, the main library here. Then the storm really comes. So now you have all the books, all the paintings, all the prints, everything belongs to the Osler Library is no longer there. It's in another part. It's in McGill's library system now. Completely in McGill's library system. So what's the storm? The Dean of Libraries instead of coming through the board of curators or the standing committee, goes directly to the principal of McGill and says to the principal of McGill that there are reasons that the Osler Library should be closed, and therefore she would like to proceed with closing the Osler Library. Also goes to the provost, same discussion. Close the Osler Library. So what's the proposal? So what is the proposal now for the Osler Library? Okay. So the best way I think you can think about this is a drawing by Jean Miro. It's called, and it's got a collage here too. And you can sort of see it's a body here. It's got a head, a body, sort of parts of legs and arms, and this funny sort of collage here. So the idea was that the most valuable books, about 500 of the most valuable books, you know, the Incubili, etc., are going to go to the Fiat Lux rare book room. And therefore, what they're basically doing is taking the head of the Osler Library away. Now, the other 7,500 that were the Osler gift, probably going to go predominantly into storage. So you're taking away the body here, right? Well, what about all the archives, letters, all of Osler's stuff? Where's that going to go? Well, they're going to send it to the McGill archives. Well, what about all the prints and art and everything we have in the Osler Library related to that? Another part of the body. It's going to go to the McGill art collection. Well, how about the other 80,000 books? Where are they going to go? Well, probably going to go to the Fiat Lux, but potentially they might go to, you know, some other place too, like in storage for some of them, for example. And where are they going to go? Or where are a lot of these going to go? Well, they're going to go into a repository. So what's a repository? It's a bit like these collages here, away from the body. And on top, you have all these little robots. And these little robots, you know, can find any book. They have about 30 some odd books in each of these little boxes. And they're all off-site. And if you want a book, you put it in. The information is sent to this repository area. The robot finds your book, brings it up, individuals pack it, and send it by truck to McGill. It's quite a distance from the two. So imagine for a second, every book that people want a lot of is going to be moved from this repository to McGill. The individual is going to use it and going to go back, and it's going to cost money, but more than that, how much pollution is each important book in the Osler Library going to cost? Where it causes none almost in the Osler Library. So just for a second, think of what that would mean. And to me, these little boxes are like these little collages that Moreau has put together, not really associated with McGill, but away from McGill, these boxes here. So what was happening then? Well, we had survived many blows over the years to the Osler Library. However, this was different. This was dismemberment. How could you think about this? Well, here's the Osler Library, Dean of Libraries. You can argue about the Dean of Medicine, the Provost, and the Principal of the University. Quite an interesting group of people to try to deal with. So, how do we deal with it? I cannot tell you how important these individuals were, along with many, many, many others. But these individuals are critical. They were all on the standing committee, which is really the committee that's sort of associated with running the Osler Library. Who are they? Well, this is previous Dean, Richard Cruz. He was important because he had been Dean of Medicine for a long time, many connections with all the important people at McGill, and lobbied like crazy to not have the Osler Library closed. That didn't work. We had Lily de Grandpré, previous member of the Board of Governors of McGill University, very important family. And Lily, along with Abe Fuchs, who was another Dean of Medicine, along with Mario, were associated with the Governance Committee. And this Governance Committee was basically put together to try to put it together why it's not a good idea to move the Osler Library for governance reasons related to a number of things. And then Brian Levitt, who he ran the largest law firm in Canada and was the chairman of the board of directors of the TD Bank, chairman of the board of directors of the Montreal Museum of Art, and also the principal of Bishop's University. He's on our group. He'll be important in the next discussion. Pamela Miller, previous Osler librarian, and Faith Wallace, previous Osler librarian. Sorry about the change in spelling. So this is the group. They put together and worked together, putting together a governance report, putting together a report, an architectural report, and I worked with Brian on the architectural report. And I had the opportunity to meet with the architects who were designing the new library. And when I met with them, they said, well, they never told us about the Osler Library. And therefore it wasn't included in the plans. We could give you 300 square feet and put a few of the books around and things, but that's all we could give you. And obviously that wasn't going to go very far with us from that point of view. One of the issues was related to, is the Osler Library safe? So what happened was that there's a group called the Canadian Conservation Institute. They did a full report of the Osler Library. And what they say is, overall, based on information provided, the Osler Library appears to provide good preservation for a collection primarily of rare books and paper-based materials. So you can't argue that the place is a problem. It's all been rebuilt. We've got all kinds of new, sort of security in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a brand new library. So that's okay. So what was the real thing that we were able to do? The lawyers. We brought the lawyers in. And Brian Levitt, with his position, asked some of his friends who were experts in this situation, not only experts in this situation about deeds, but experts in British law. Because the deeds and the memorandum were all done in England. And since Canada is still related to England, and the deeds were done there, it actually is the deeds have to be dealt with in England, related to law. And this law firm did it for free. They thought it was so important, they would do it for free. And they did it for free. And they produced a marvelous report. What's the summary? After careful consideration of the relevant documents and facts, as well as the applicable legislation, doctrine, jurisprudence, we are of the opinion that the entire contents of the Osler Library should be returned and restored to its original moorings within the Faculty of Medicine, currently located in the medical school. and should remain there permanently or until the Board of Curators determines otherwise. We are of further opinion that the decision of the Board of Curators should prevail in this regard, based on the recommendations of the Standing Committee, who you just saw. We're all part of that. There are others too, medical students, etc. And the proposal to move the Osler be rejected. I don't know what happened, but can you imagine now that you're a lawyer for McGill University and this comes to you from the Osler Library? And these people are willing to fight you at any point? What happens then? They back down. And so, the library is returned. The Osler vision is restored. And the library has a rebirth. Now, related to rebirth, there's two issues here. One is, yes, the library is going to be okay. It's in its building. All the books are going to be there. Everything is there, all brought back. Everything is brought back. Books, everything. It's all back now. All back. But is it only that that's important? Just the books, the building, the paneling, all that. There's something else that's really important here. What I'd like to do here is, can Brendan, Ross, can you stand up wherever you are? Joel, can you? Oh, Samantha's there. Yeah, Samantha, I didn't see you there, hiding in the corner. I think I can tell you with 100% certainty, if this Osler Library had been closed a couple of years ago, which was what was going to happen, these individuals would not be here. Because there would be no Osler Library. There would be no sort of ESSE Awards or the Molina Awards or any of the things we have, or all the other things that we have, international students and researchers that come. It just would flitter away. There'd be no librarian, probably. Why would you need a librarian for the Osler Library? Why would you need a board of curators? Standing committee, for God's sakes. There's not a little Osler Library to have. So the real important thing is this. The medical students, because, of course, what Osler wanted was the medical students to have access to the library, the researchers to have access to the library. So the vision is restored. You can sit down now, guys. And we're also working on an endowment to replace our lost library. Because the problem now is that if we're going to make the library better, if we're going to have more engagement with medical students, if we're going to do more research, if we're going to do all the things we want to do, we can't do it with one person, one librarian. It can't be done. We think, and we know, that we're moving ahead with an endowment. So the endowment idea is we're going to raise money, and that money is going to pay for the salary of a research librarian to help everybody who's interested in anything that's in the Osler Library. Medical students, outside researchers, etc. And the two librarians can work together with the administration, with buying books, etc. But the whole idea is to make it much more effective, make it much more, not only a rebirth, but really like a renaissance from that point of view. So that's that. So, some people have heard me say this before, but Paul Valéry, who was a French poet, when he was writing about Leonardo, you know I was going to get Leonardo in, you knew that, said, what a person leaves after them are the dreams that their name inspires and the works that make their name a symbol of admiration. So it would appear that dreams are not enough. You can dream all you want, But that's not enough. You have to take those dreams and do something with them. Make something happen related to those dreams if you're really going to have some type of impact. And if you consider, as I consider really, people in the world is some type of poetry or a poem. And every single person adds a part to that poem. Some people add a few more words than others, but every single part of that poem is critical. Every single part. So, if that's true, that we're living through some type of a poem, our lives and our humanity is this ongoing poem written by everybody in the world, then really to the poem of medicine, Osler contributed many volumes. And we discuss that all the time, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and forever probably. To the poetry of McGill, William Osler contributed the Osler Library of the History of Medicine. And we were able to save it. And to the poetry of the world, William Osler contributed whole libraries, helping many other libraries, along with the Osler Library. So what's the end? The end is that a number of people working together can change even well-established universities that have incredible power and change their minds. Not necessarily with all our ability to convince them, which in truth was probably unsuccessful, but because Sir William Osler carefully wrote his memorandums and his deeds, so there was no way in heaven that the McGill University administrators could overwhelm that deed. Especially the idea of keeping the books together. That they could not deal with, that they were going to dismember the Osler Library. Their lawyers could not deal with that. And therefore the Osler Library is forever there, and the curators decide that it should not be there, from that point of view. The second point is these are some individuals, medical students, who also helped us. As a medical student, be careful. Because in one way, these large organizations put you into sort of a box of some sort. They separate you. They don't even give you your names. And they say that you're not that important. That's not true. The reason you have a medical school is to train doctors. I agree you have research. I've done it. I agree you have all kinds of things. That too. But the core of a medical school is to teach medical students. So you have a lot of power, and you should use it for the good, whatever you decide is a good. I think in 100 years, that they look back on our time period right now, I can tell you, I can project that they're going to look back and say, guys, why were you always at war? Why were you always at war? Then they're going to ask, why did you let the climate deteriorate to such a point that your grandchildren are not going to be able to breathe the air? How did you do that? And many other issues. How did you eliminate more species in the last 20 years that have been eliminated since the beginning of life? How did you do that, guys? How did you do it? So my thinking is this. I think in one way, we've been a bit of a failure, our generation. But there's a new generation coming. And my suggestion is that that new generation has to, deal with these issues, whether we're talking about, a medicine of survival or we're talking about whatever. But I think we should consider that you, as our medical students who are coming out, and other individuals, graduate students, etc. here, who are younger, and have their whole world in front of you, and your whole lives in front of you, is to think deeply as to how your children are going to survive. And I'm not pessimistic by nature. This shows you that you can beat the system. But I think to beat the system, probably, everybody has to work at this together at all levels. Be careful in the medical world. Do not let artificial intelligence take the humanity out of medicine. I do not believe that computers are going to cry. I don't think that can happen. I work with the system. They're not built, nor will they ever be built for that. They're positive. They want to grow. They're not going to cry. I'm convinced computers are not going to love anybody. They don't care. I'm convinced, I don't think patients are going to like having an avatar in front of them, asking them questions, and not a human being. Even if that avatar is very good. Computers will learn how to be very good, but not as good as we can be. Not with a human touch, not with our ability to innovate and care. Occasionally cry, occasionally love your patients. They're not going to do that. They can't. So we have an incredible advantage over these systems. Let's use it. Let's hit them at their weakness. And their weakness is they cannot cry. They cannot love. They cannot care for another individual. The programs don't allow it. They never will. So we have the ability to control these beasts. And I can tell you, if you don't control them in some way, they'll continue to evolve. There's an interesting theory about consciousness. It's called the global blackboard theory or whatever. And it is that, why are we conscious, for God's sakes? Why are we conscious? It's 3 pounds of stuff inside of our head, and we're conscious. We understand the world. We can see the world. We can interpret the world. But how does that happen? And so what this theory says, there's a number of theories for consciousness, but what this one says is we have all this information coming into us. Our brains are computing this information continuously. And they're like artificial intelligence systems, right? And if you have enough of those systems going at the same time, connecting at the same time, that what happens then is that you can suddenly awake. So think of yourself sleeping, and you have a dream. And there's a visual component to the dream, an auditory component to the dream, other components to the dream, and suddenly you wake up. Well, why are you waking up? Well, you're waking up because so much of your brain is working at the same time that it just wakes you up. You become conscious. That's an automatic thing that's associated with the brain. So that theory says you put enough AI systems together, you can recreate the brain. The other theory says the brain is unique. Why is the brain unique then? Well, let's think about this. You have 10 billion cells in your head, in your brain. Each cell probably communicates with another 1,000. So let's go up to times another 3 zeros. But there's something else. On each neuron, there's these thousands let's say 1,000 synapses. But they're not all active at the present time. One leaves a little bit of sodium in, another one leaves a little bit of sodium in, until there's enough sodium fluxing into that neuron that it fires and you get an electrical impulse. If you put that together, the possibility each one of these is modulating it, there's more modulation system in one human brain than there are stars in the universe. That's how complex one human brain really is. So based on that, computers cannot, they just cannot reproduce that. So we have an inherent advantage. Somehow evolution has given us this incredible thing inside of our brain, inside of our head, this brain. And if anybody's seen a brain, it pulsates, it has this yellow color, weighs about 3 pounds or so. Rather incredible that it can do these things. But it's what we are. It's humanity of what we are. Every moment, everything that you're listening to, every feeling you have, that's what's going on continuously inside your brain. More connections and possible connections than there are stars in the universe. Let's use the stars we have in our brain. I think everybody can make the world a little bit better. And if everybody puts their poems into the story will get better, not worse. Let's make the poetry of the human race better. Thank you very much.